Imagine losing $1.3 billion in just 6 minutes. Honestly, it's hard to even wrap your head around that number. But on Thursday morning, February 21st, 2018, that is exactly what happened to Snap's market capitalization. A massive chunk of financial value literally evaporated in a window of time shorter than it takes to brew your morning coffee. This $1.3 billion figure, which you can see confirmed by the CNBC report cited right here, represents one of the most stunning flash crashes in modern tech history. But the story of why this actually happened is far more complex and, honestly, much more fascinating than the headlines ever admitted. Okay, let's dive into this. If you ask most people what caused that epic $1.3 billion plunge, they'll immediately point to this exact quote from Kylie Jenner. Sourced from CNBC here, Kylie, who had one of the most followed accounts on social media at the time, tweeted out this simple kind of passing thought to her 24.5 million followers. And wow, within minutes of this tweet going live, Snap stock plummeted 6.1%. So the popular narrative became that this is a story about celebrity influence at scale. But here's where it gets really interesting. That tweet actually wasn't the cause of the fire. It was just a signal flare over a fire that had already been burning for months. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're basically conducting a forensic investigation into the true root cause of that massive valuation loss. We're going to break down a fundamental project management and user research failure that not only derailed Snapchat's growth back in 2018, but is actually actively haunting AI product teams today. If you want to understand how perfectly executed research can still give you absolutely disastrous results just because you asked the wrong questions, you are in exactly the right place. Section 1, the design logic, or the alibi. To really grasp this failure, we first need to look at the very logical, well-intentioned rationale behind the infamous Snapchat redesign of late 2017. As you'll see in this November 2017 employee memo cited from Cheddar, CEO Evan Spiegel had a super clear goal: separate social content from media content. Spiegel had realized something absolutely crucial. The app's interface had grown so organically over the years that it had basically become a maze to newcomers. If you were a new user, you were totally lost. This interface complexity was severely holding back Snap's international growth. So the problem was real, and the proposed solution, putting messages and stories from friends in one place and publisher content in another, made perfect structural sense. So the product team went to work. They tested the new, cleaner interface against the old, confusing one. And the usability research was actually incredibly rigorous. It overwhelmingly confirmed that the new design was highly intuitive for newcomers. Participants who had never even opened the old app could navigate the new one effortlessly, find exactly what they were looking for, and completely understand where things lived. The data gave the team a loud and clear signal: this works, ship it. So they did with absolute confidence. Now, what's really interesting about this transition is what the numbers show next. Section 2, forensic evidence of failure following the data. Let's move from the theory of the redesign straight into the cold, hard reality of the aftermath. The data tells a pretty brutal story here. According to Snap Inc.'s own earnings releases, which are sourced right here, they closed out Q4 of 2017 with 194 million daily active users. But in Q1 of 2018, that number dropped to 191 million. And by Q2, it was down to 188 million. Look, this wasn't just some minor blip. This was an unprecedented drop of millions of highly engaged users, marking the very first decline in daily active users in Snapchat's reported history. Up until this point, Snap had literally grown its user base every single quarter. Yet, despite this historic drop, leadership's confidence in their initial research didn't waver at all. During the Q1 2018 earnings call, Evan Spiegel flat out stated, "We are not going to change the fundamental premise of the redesign. The premise is the right one." This perfectly illustrates a team firmly anchored to their initial data. They assumed the exiting users were just going through a temporary transition phase, struggling with a brief learning curve. They believed the premise was rock solid and that the data would just eventually correct itself. But the users were telling a completely different story. Right on the heels of the redesign, a petition titled "Bring Back the Old Snapchat" absolutely exploded online, gathering the 1.2 million signatures you see cited from change.org here. 1.2 million. You do not get that kind of volume from casual users who are just mildly annoyed. That massive scale proves these were powerful, dedicated users. These are people who had built complex mental models and daily workflows around the old interface. To them, the redesign didn't just move a few buttons around, it completely destroyed the value and engagement of the app they loved. When we lay out the timeline, everything just clicks right into place. The redesign rolled out in November 2017. User frustration immediately started building. By February 2018, that frustration reached a boiling point, which is exactly when Kylie Jenner sent her tweet. And finally, in May 2018, the DAU decline was officially reported. This timeline proves, for sure, that Jenner's tweet did not cause the user decline. Her tweet merely validated and amplified a massive wave of user frustration that had been festering since November. So the crucial point is, Section 3, the real root cause, unmasking the culprit. If the research was rigorous and the logic was sound, how on earth did it result in millions of lost users and over $1 billion in lost market cap? It all comes down to the scope of the research. Snap's user research flawlessly tested for new user comprehension. It successfully answered the question, is this intuitive for someone who has never used the app before? But it disastrously ignored the question that actually mattered. How will our 194 million existing users behave when we completely upend their interface? Basically, they answered the wrong question. They optimized for the people they didn't have, at the massive expense of the people they did. This fatal error in project management is known as the adaptation assumption. It's this untested, incredibly dangerous belief that your existing users will just seamlessly adapt to a new workflow without any drop in their engagement. Snap used this assumption as a substitute for actually testing the reactions of their 194 million existing power users. They probably figured, hey, they've adopted updates before. They'll adapt to this one. Well, that assumption proved to be a very, very costly mistake. Which brings us to a really fascinating question for today. Why are modern, highly sophisticated AI teams in 2026 repeating this exact same mistake? The technology has completely changed, but the fundamental trap of user research absolutely has not. Let's move to and see how this builds. Section 4, Modern Project Management Parallels. AI integration in 2026. The parallels to today are striking, and recognizing them is your key to avoiding your own billion-dollar blind spot. Check out this recent May 2026 research paper by Ferrarezi and colleagues, sourced right here. They found that AI feature rollouts often end up being technically correct but operationally wrong. It's wild because, just like Snap, modern AI teams frequently test new features on fresh, unbiased users to get perfectly clean comprehension data. And the data always looks great. The AI simplifies the task. But by solely relying on that clean data, they blindly disrupt the deeply internalized workflows and muscle memory of their existing power users. They're optimizing for a clean test environment, not the messy, actual reality of daily engagement. So how do you actually prevent this? Well, the 2026 research points to a mandatory project management safety gate, the two parallel research tracks. Track 1, test new users for feature comprehension. Make sure the tool actually makes sense. But simultaneously, you absolutely must run track 2. Test your existing power users for engagement behavior. Do not assume they will adapt. Prove it. If your new user comprehension goes up, but your power user engagement drops, you've got a critical divergence. And that divergence is exactly the data you need to see before you decide to ship. Which leaves us with this final thought. Whether you're redesigning a massive social media platform or integrating the latest AI workflow tool into your enterprise software, the data you gather is only ever as good as the scope of your inquiry. Take a hard look at the research validating your current projects. Are you testing the reality of how your most valuable users will behave? Or are your project metrics flawlessly answering the wrong question?